All right, Nuggets fans, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I'm here to discuss the Denver Nuggets loss to the Milwaukee Bucks last night. Final score 121-112. Felt kind of similar, I'm not going to lie, to the Nuggets versus Pacers game, but in reverse. Denver basically got whatever they wanted in that game offensively. Never really felt that challenged by the Indiana Pacers at any point. And I feel like the Bucks, this was kind of in a similar place, just because Denver couldn't get any stops when they needed to, and it just never felt like they were going to be able to string together the full scoring possessions at the same time in order to actually come back from this one. Nikola Jokic had a good game, and he was about it. I can't really point to anybody else and say, you had a good game, because I just don't think that existed. If there was another guy that you could point to, I would guess maybe Christian Brown. He had 13 points, and Damian Lillard had 19. I know Dame didn't take a bunch of shots, but part of that was because I thought Christian's defense was okay. Certainly not the negative that it was painted to be by some last night. But look, it is what it is. Sometimes you get games like this, and I put in the title, or at least in the banner up top for this particular show, meh, loss to the Bucks. Because sometimes this happens. Oh my gosh, did you hear my voice just there? Holy cow. Sometimes this happens. Sometimes this is just a thing that happens in the NBA where you can't shoot, the opposing team shoots well, and you lose. Now, we can diagnose why, we can assign blame, we can talk about, like, did that mean anything? Does it mean anything that the Nuggets didn't perform that well in this particular matchup? I don't know. Like, I think everybody and their mother has a whole bunch of opinions on what this actually meant and how much this meant. I don't consider it that way in this particular game. Now, look, if Denver continues to struggle in these upcoming games, then sure, then we can talk about it. To me, this was a one-off after they had played a great game against Indiana just a couple days ago. But we'll talk about it all. We'll get through it. We will go over various details. But before we do, really quickly, this podcast, as you know, is brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025, whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor. Got a whole bunch of odds, large selection of odds on everything from NBA, college basketball, NHL, and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. Make sure to go check them out. BetOnline, the game starts here. Once again, I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn. Thank you for tuning into the show. If you can, it would be awesome if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'll probably go for about 30 minutes today. Denver is going to play tonight against Detroit. We'll get into that, a little bit of a preview there in the final segment. But before we do, let's talk about this game against the Bucks. Milwaukee really wanted this game, and you can see it on a lot of these teams when they face Denver. Milwaukee has had a problem with Denver in recent years. Like, whenever Jokic comes in and when the Nuggets come to town, usually these two teams split, if I recall. Like, the Bucks win the first matchup and then the Nuggets win the second matchup. That's almost always what happens. But Milwaukee really wanted this one. They played a good game plan. They really showcased their shooters. They got to the free throw line. They did a good job of defending without fouling. They played a good game. And Denver, I thought that Jokic played a good game. 32 points, 14 rebounds, 10 assists. 13 of 16 from the field is a crazy number, especially when it is paired with a whole bunch of poor shooting from his teammates. Michael Porter Jr. goes 5 of 22. Aaron Gordon goes 4 of 13. Christian goes 5 of 11. He was fine, but subpar for his standards. And then Jamal Murray goes 9 of 20. Again, fine, but subpar for the new standards that he is trying to establish himself and has really established for himself over the course of these past couple months. So a lot of talk there and like lots of things that you can go over. Denver also off the bench. Russell Westbrook was +7 in his 25 minutes. Julian Strawther was +6 in his 20 minutes. Those guys I thought brought good energy and change of pace to the game. This was really about the starters. This was like, I thought that Russ was actually okay. I thought that Julian was solid. But again, like they have their own flaws, they have their own warts, and if you play those guys anymore, you're probably getting a few more negative plus minus opportunities for those guys. But Michael Malone did an interesting thing in this game where Zeke Naji only played 9 minutes. He played 1 minute almost exactly in the second half. And I'm not sure what the reason was. Obviously, I wasn't there to ask. Zeke Naji was a +7 in his 9 minutes and had a steal and a block, had a bucket, had a couple rebounds. Overall, I thought did pretty well in his time. But Michael Malone went back to Michael Porter with 2.5 minutes left to go in the third, despite the fact that Porter was really struggling in this game. Malone could have gone away from him. He chose not to. He chose to instead lean into Porter, try to play him as much as possible, play him through his mistakes, and see if he could rise to the challenge. And he didn't. Like, sometimes that happens. Porter had 12 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. Like, the 10 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal is pretty good. But when you have 12 points on 22 shots, that's hard to overcome for any team. And when Milwaukee scores 121, you need not everybody, but pretty close to everybody to be scoring efficiently and on the same page and doing the right things. And Porter just wasn't that. He looked very uncomfortable out there. The 3-pointers that he got, I thought were mostly good ones, and he just bricked them. And you can forgive that because I shared this stat earlier yesterday that in his entire NBA career, there have been 6 regular seasons in which Porter has had a half where he has shot at least 5 3-point attempts and made 0 of them. He had that in the first half. He was 0 for 5. Only 6 times in history had he done that. And that to me is notable because, like, he just doesn't shoot like that often. He is a very, very effective shooter, and he capitalizes on so many of the advantages that he gets from playing next to Jokic, from playing next to Murray in that 2-man game. And early on in the season, he was shooting, like, and he has overall shot the cover off the ball. Porter very rarely has bad games like this. And people want to write it off to physicality or just not being ready for prime time, things like that. I don't know if I can go that far. Like, you guys know, I've had my issues and my concerns about Porter and the Nuggets overall, but like, I don't want to assign undue blame to somebody for just having a bad shooting night because it happens sometimes. And like, Porter could come back today and shoot 10 of 12, 10 of 16, like 13 of 18 in this upcoming game against the Pistons. And would anybody be surprised by that? Actually, no, because he's that talented of a shooter. So there was also this narrative that, like, there were a lot of folks that wanted Malone to bench him, that wanted Malone to take him out because, like, he wasn't shooting well. But you don't just do that to shooters. Like, and Porter's a grade A shooter. You don't just take them off the floor because they have missed shots, especially guys that you trust. Because, and also, like, there are a lot of folks that were unhappy about Porter's trigger discipline. Like, he was just shooting it. Like, even if he had a relatively, like, it was an open look, but there was a small contest, and people were disappointed that he was shooting. I don't really subscribe to that. Like, I think that what he goes through as a shooter, like, you want him as aggressive as possible. That is what makes Michael Porter, and what makes other teams react to his shooting as strongly as they do. So, like, Klay Thompson has these games all the time. Steph Curry has these games all the time. Like, this is the part of the process for these shooters. You just got to live with it sometimes. So I am just not going to over-index on this. And Marcel Zero says it here. The issue with consistency is we can't have multiple starters, or we can have multiple starters doing that at the same time. Totally agree. Like if Porter's in that place, then you need Aaron Gordon to step up. And he shot 4 of 13 from the field and 1 of 6 from 3 after he had been so good spacing the floor and scoring over the course of these past few weeks. And then Jamal Murray, who's 9 of 20, 2 of 5 from 3. He doesn't get to the free throw line at all. He was upset about that, of course. But when you have Porter having the night that he has, other guys have to step up. Other guys have to be more aggressive and be correctly aggressive. And I just don't think that Murray was. I don't think that Gordon was, especially. If I look at the shot chart for Jamal Murray specifically, like just a bunch of long twos, and then he didn't finish around the rim. Like he had 5 shots that he made in the paint, but the jumpers that he took just were not efficient. He made 3 of 10 outside shots. And that's just not good enough if you want to beat a team like the Bucks that can score 120. You've got to score at least 122 in this case, but you have to be able to outpace them. And when the Bucks are getting the offense that they get, and it can be like very challenging if you don't provide the right stuff for your side. So look, Denver needed a little bit more. Aaron Gordon didn't shoot the ball well. He also didn't finish in the restricted area very well. And those are notable issues to me. Like, yes, Brook Lopez is a very good rim protector. Yes, Giannis Antetokounmpo is a very good defender in his own right. Did it feel like Aaron was getting that many tough shots? No, like he just missed. And look, that happens. You can't give Michael Porter a pass and then give Aaron Gordon some anger. Like obviously the reason why Denver lost this game was mostly due to Michael Porter Jr. And I was on both ends of the floor because I thought that Mike's defense was also pretty shaken. It was also pretty shaky. And so if you're not ready to play, then maybe everybody else is right. Maybe Michael Malone should have just gone with somebody else, like a Julian Strawther, like a Russell Westbrook. But I also understand why he played the starters. Like, I have news for people. That's what he's going to do in the playoffs. That's what Michael Malone's going to want to do in the playoffs. It's what he's going to try to do. He's going to give those guys as much of an option and opportunity as possible, especially when things aren't going well for most of the other people on the rotation. So it will be interesting to see. I'm curious to see how he handles the rotation tonight against Detroit. I would expect more minutes for a guy like Zeke Naji, more minutes for some other folks. And we will see how they handle themselves. Jeff Morton is in the chat. Hello, Jeff. He says, you want takes? Here's a take. The Nuggets play competent teams. When the Nuggets play competent teams, their flaws struggle to be papered over. They are so flawed. Also, Mike will be better the more he plays out of the injury. And it's fair. Like, people forget that he went into the All-Star break with an injury. And it's very rare. He's been so healthy for so much of his career, like the last few years of his career, that people forget that like he was injury prone before that. So he hasn't had to deal with a whole bunch of injuries. He's kept himself ready. He's kept himself in shape. He's kept himself healthy over the course of these last few years. This is kind of an abnormal time. The longer, again, and Jeff, I think you're right, the longer we get away from him being actually like an issue from an injury perspective, I think he'll get a little bit better. So we'll see. We'll see how he handles it. We'll see how that looks. Another couple of offensive tidbits for this game. Denver as a team shot 9 of 34 from 3. It's why when Michael Porter struggles, the Nuggets shooting struggles are really exacerbated. But it's not like the Nuggets had a whole bunch of awesome shooters around Michael Porter. Aaron Gordon went 1 of 6. Jamal Murray went 2 of 5. That's solid. Julian Strawther went 2 of 4. That's solid. Russell Westbrook went 1 of 4. And some of the threes that Russell Westbrook was taking, especially in the third quarter, it's pretty aggressive stuff. And sometimes, look, he has been shooting pretty well from the corners on threes. And like that's been a surprising development for him this year. Now, that like, the gap between his shooting in the corners and his shooting above the break is very notable, and it just makes me think that once the pressure kind of gets ratcheted up, that the corner 3-point shooting is going to go back down because that's just he's never been a shooter. So we will see whether he can hold on to that. We'll see whether he can play better and continue to make those shots. But the drives were also an issue. He didn't turn the ball over as much, and that's one of the reasons why he was a +7. Julian Strawther spaced the floor reasonably well, and in those lineups, Denver was functional, and so he was a +6. It's not a surprise that those guys were positive, and then Michael Porter was a -20, and Aaron Gordon was a -14, and Murray and Brown were -13, -12, respectively. But Denver's spacing was bad. Denver's ability to get to the free throw line, 9 of 11, bad. The Bucks were 23 of 28. That's it's going to be hard to overcome that. That's for sure. All right. Let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to chat about Denver's defense and how annoying it is now getting that their defense continues to play at the level that it is. And then we'll wrap up with the best and worst parts of the NBA. We'll be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. If you're enjoying, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I can understand if you're not enjoying because it's not a particularly enjoyable watch to hear about Denver struggling against Milwaukee and like losing another game on national TV where everybody gets to see your weaknesses and everybody gets to see how bad you are. It feels like Denver's 0 for a million on these national TV games of late. Like they have not been successful in a lot of them. And it's just a unfortunate reality that the Nuggets are handling right now. Marco says, looks like you didn't get enough sleep, Ryan. Absolutely did not get enough sleep last night. But we roll through because this is my job and I take it seriously and I do my best. So I appreciate everybody looking out for me. Okay. Denver's defense continues to suck. They are 20th in the NBA in defensive rating on cleaning the glass. And it just continues to annoy me that you get into situations like this one where Denver's offense is clearly not at peak level. Jokic is playing great, but unfortunately not a lot of others are playing great. And usually in those cases, the response that Denver and a good, competent team would have is that they would clamp down on the defensive end. They would really try to generate as many points off of turnovers as they can. They would attempt to grab defensive rebounds and get out on the fast break. They would lock down. They would try to flip the momentum. Instead, the Bucks scored 37 points in the fourth quarter. Denver's defense through the first 3 quarters was okay. 30 points allowed in the first, 24 in the second. That's a good quarter. 20 in the third, they had 30. Sorry. And in the fourth, they allowed 37 points. And when you do that, it makes it very challenging to come back from a game. Like Denver at that point, because Denver loses by 9, they lost the fourth quarter by 6. They were down 3 in the fourth. And the Bucks just separated because, one, Denver, they scored their most points of any quarter in the fourth quarter with 31, but they just could not get enough stops. And part of that was Murray was on the floor, Strawther was on the floor, Porter was on the floor for a lot of that time. And DeAndre Jordan, he's been a solid defensive player for Denver. He can't paper over that. It's just not going to happen. So in that regard, Michael Malone probably screwed up in terms of the rotation that he put out there. Like you're putting out too many guys that are offensive one-way players and not enough guys that can really account for the defensive end. But the problem is when you try to put out your defensive guys, you can't score on offense. And so that he's caught in between a rock and a hard place here because there's no good lineup that he could throw out there that doesn't include Jokic. So you got to find some opportunities, and maybe Denver, like in some of these cases, like I think they're trying to match up Aaron Gordon's minutes with Giannis. Maybe they should have thrown Zeke on Giannis and then staggered Aaron Gordon with the second unit to try to give Denver just a little bit more substance on that end, a two-way ability. But I don't blame Malone for kind of handcuffing Aaron Gordon to Giannis, who was very good, but he wasn't great. Like 28, 19, and 17 sounds good when you say it, but he shot 11 of 23, at least according to this box score. 11 of 23 is not that good, and 5 of 8 from the free throw line is not that good. Denver had opportunities to overcome what Giannis put out there, and they just were not able to do that. Part of that was Gary Trent shot 50. He had 15 points on 6 of 8 from the field and 3 of 4 from 3. AJ Green made 2 fourth-quarter threes. Damian Lillard just got whatever he wanted when the going got tough. Brook Lopez drove right past Nikola Jokic and collected an and one in one situation in the fourth quarter, and then had 22 points as a big man. I don't know how many times Brook Lopez has had over 20 this season, but it's not that much, and that is not a great sign for Jokic's defense specifically. As awesome as Jokic was on offense, he was not good on defense. And like, look, he's in terms of the list of concerns for Denver, he is very low on the on like his defense is very low for me, because I just believe that he'll be able to ratchet it up a little bit and be better when the time comes. What I don't know is whether the rest of the Nuggets will be able to, because I know that Jokic sees the floor and he'll be able to read things and he'll be able to put himself at least into a good position, and then the effort will ultimately be there. But this Nuggets team is just a low basketball IQ defense. They're just behind all the time. And even when they're in the good position, the weak side and the rotations and when you're scrambling, the effort just isn't there. And it just is very frustrating to watch what I think is a team that has championship aspirations not do the good things that a good defense does. Like, they don't have any of those good habits on that end of the floor. They give up, they don't force a lot of turnovers, which is something that I've talked about. The Bucks, they had 11 turnovers as a team last night, and that's just not a lot. Actually, I guess it was 11 turnovers, and the important thing was that they scored, Denver scored 8 points off of those 11 Bucks turnovers. So the turnovers didn't actually hurt them. Denver did not handle themselves that well. They didn't capitalize on the Bucks' mistakes, and they didn't generate enough of those mistakes to begin with. And then the Bucks also got enough offensive rebounds that it was only 7, actually. It wasn't even that crazy. Like, Denver just didn't defend. They didn't guard. They didn't their overall levels were just not good enough on the defensive end. And it's unfortunate because this is a clear gap between them and other championship contenders, other teams that want to play at that high level. Like, do I think that Denver's main guys like Murray, Porter, Jokic, Gordon, do I think that they'll be better defensively in the playoffs? Yeah, when they try. When the effort's a little bit better, sure. But I also kind of am a little shaky on how hard they're going to be able to try when there's so much pressure on them on the offensive end as well. And the other thing is that they're just not that talented of a defense. And so Peyton Watson might affect this. He might give them a little bit more juice on the defensive end. Playing Zeke Naji more might actually give Denver something. I thought that Zeke played really well defensively. I thought he played pretty good overall in this game, and I was kind of surprised that Malone went away from him. But it just feels like the Nuggets are not a serious defense. Like, you're not serious people. And that is a major concern for a team that has serious aspirations. Like, you can't just play one way and assume that it is going to be good enough, especially when you're playing against these good teams. Like, most of these good teams will find a way to slow down your own offense. And I threw this number out there in the recap. Let me see if I can pull it up and get the exact number. When Denver's offense is rolling, it's pretty clear that they have a good chance. Denver, like on NBA.com, they have a 119.1 offensive rating. That's really good. That's second best in the NBA. The only team that's better is Cleveland. In games where Denver exceeds 120, so like a really great offensive night, they have a 23-2 record. 23-2 is crazy. Like, Denver's effectively unbeatable when they have a great offense. When other teams can't shut down their offense, Denver's going to win. But Denver doesn't get to that level more than about 40% of the time, because they have a 15-19 record, 34 total games, where they don't get to a 120 offensive rating. 15-19 is sub 500. Like, when Denver isn't at that threshold of elite, they are so much more vulnerable. So, and that's what's going to happen in the playoffs, by the way. Denver's going to face a team like Minnesota or LA or Houston or Memphis or OKC. These are all good defenses. These are all very good defenses, talented defense, high IQ defenses. And they are going to find ways to bother the Nuggets. And the big question here is what happens when the Nuggets aren't running at peak offensive efficiency? Do they have a different way to win? And the answer so far this season has been no. Denver does not win defensive games. It's just how it goes. So we will see whether they can change that around. They have 23 more games left this season. I think they are who they are. They're 59 games in. Like, we just kind of know who they are. But maybe they can flip some things around. They have another couple of tests on this road trip, and I'd like to see them pass those, or at least get a little bit closer in some of these cases. Actually, J.K. Walrus says it best here. It looks like such a comfortable experience playing offense against them. It's so true. Like, Denver doesn't bother anybody. They are not a team that gets into your chili a little bit and makes you uncomfortable and forces mistakes and like makes you mad. Like, Denver, just the way that they play defense is like, all right, we're just going to go through the motions. We're going to play our shell coverage. Hey, we're going to be a little bit more aggressive here. Oh, man, they rotated behind us and they got a dunk. Or, oh, man, nobody rotated on the weak side and they got a three. All right. So that's going to be how it is. Then it's going to be a short playoff run. That's for sure. All right. Enough of that. The best and worst part of the NBA, and we'll wrap up with this. The best and worst part of the NBA is that there's always another game. As you can tell from my status, it's exhausting to cover, to play in the NBA, to maintain the level of schedule that they maintain. They are going from Milwaukee to Detroit. It's not a long flight by any stretch, but they'll play again tonight against the Detroit Pistons. You know, the team that's won 8 in a row. They're pretty good team, the Detroit Pistons, all of a sudden. On the year, Detroit now, holy cow, they are 33-26. They won their final 4 games before the All-Star break, and they've won their first 4 games out of the All-Star break. Their most recent game, they won by 20 against the Boston Celtics. They are a good team. Cade Cunningham is a great player. He was always I would say, an underrated player because he played in Detroit and because there's a lot of analytics folks kind of like me that were a little bit concerned about some of the underlying numbers with him. But it's very clear that he's just a good enough player to handle the pressure. And surprisingly, like, Jaden Ivey hasn't played for them since I think he broke his leg or broke his ankle. He was their second leading scorer. Now their second leading scorer is Malik Beasley. Beasley has played every single game this season for them. They're 33-26. He's played 59 games. Hasn't started a bunch. He's played most of his games off the bench. But he's shooting 42.5% from three on 9.4 3-point attempts per game. That dude is getting up shots. He is shooting a whole bunch, and he's having a good year as a result of it. So credit to him. They're a tough team. Oscar Thompson, Isaiah Stewart, Dennis Schroeder's playing for them as well. Ron Holland is a rookie that's playing for them. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a hard-nosed guy. And then Cade's tough too. So like they have a mentality of physicality. And I'm curious to see on the second night of a back-to-back, are the Nuggets going to be willing to deal with that? Are they willing to go into the trenches and go get this win? They may not be. I think Jokic will. And frankly, I think that Aaron Gordon will. I think that Russell Westbrook will. How Jamal Murray responds to this moment will be interesting. Christian Brown, how he responds will be interesting. He's going to have a better night guarding Cade Cunningham than he did guarding Damian Lillard. And there's just a lot of concerns for this team heading into this particular night. But that is the best and worst thing about the NBA. It's bad because, hey, you may not be ready for this next game to happen. But it's good because you get to turn the page. You get to turn the page on what wasn't a great performance. And now we will see whether they will be able to flip that. Nolan asks, do you think Yoke will take more shots? I don't know. Like, he was 13 of 16 in this last game, got to the free throw line 7 times. I think that so much of this last game, like the game plan did dictate because of what Lopez was doing guarding him, because of the kind of coverage that happened. Like, I'm not surprised that other guys shot a little bit more than what Jokic shot. I think that it's all going to be game plan dictated. Like, think about what happened against Indiana. Yeah, Jokic could have probably shot more, but he had a career-high 19 assists because of the way that Indiana was guarding him or not guarding other guys. So Jokic, for all of the for all the talk about the supporting cast stuff, Jokic trusts those guys more than anybody. Jokic is going to continue to buy in. He's going to continue to empower those guys. He knows how important everybody is heading into the playoffs. So he's not just going to not pass. We'll see what happens with Mike, whether he gets a whole bunch of shots up or not. Jamal will probably take the same number of shots that he took. Aaron will probably take the same number of shots that he took. So if I had to guess, I would say the over-under for Jokic's shot attempts is 18.5. And I would probably go slightly over. All right, folks, that is going to do it, I think, for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll. Brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Low energy for this particular show, so sorry about that. We'll be back. I haven't decided whether I'm going to do one for tomorrow morning. And if there is something important from this Detroit game, I will do a show on it. If there is not something important, then I'll probably just wait until after the Boston game. And so we will see how it goes. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for hanging out. All the love and support on the podcast. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on the way out. I will talk to you guys very soon.